It's a bright afternoon, and the four of us are making our way around the outside of our tranquil neighborhood. As we wander to the outskirts of the neighborhood, we stumble upon a part that we've never really paid much attention to before. It's a densely wooded area, full of tall trees. Alex ventures in first, picking his way through the underbrush. He's followed closely by Kim, her eyes bright with the excitement of this little deviation from our usual route. Ryan and I bring up the rear, a tad more cautious but curious nonetheless. As we get deeper into the woods, Alex, who's a few steps ahead, suddenly stops. He motions us over to a spot he's discovered, hidden away beneath a thicket of ivy and fallen leaves. It's a small, camouflaged hole, barely noticeable unless you're looking closely. The hole is set in the ground, lined with worn-out stones and partially covered by vegetation. "What's that?" Kim asks, pulling away some of the ivy to get a better look. Alex shines his flashlight into the hole. "Looks like it leads to a tunnel or something," he says, his voice echoing slightly, confirming his suspicion. Ryan gives the hole a skeptical look. "You think it's safe?" I shrug, excitement mingling with a slight sense of nervousness. There's only one way to find out. Pulling out her phone and turning on the flashlight. "We've got to check it out," she exclaims. Ryan looks hesitant, glancing from Kim and Alex to me. I shrug, grinning a little. Why not? It could be fun. Plus, what's the worst that can happen? Ryan sighs, rolling his eyes but following us as we start making our way down into the hole, which expands into a larger, dark tunnel. We rely on the flashlights from our phones. The air is cool and stale, and the only sound is the faint dripping of water echoing off the stone walls. Our flashlights beam ahead, illuminating the stone-lined path beneath our feet. The tunnel is tall enough for us to walk upright, the rough ceiling arched over our heads. The walls of the tunnel are cold to the touch, damp with condensation, and covered in patches of moss. The floor is littered with small pebbles, and the occasional root poking through from above. The air smells of earth and something old and abandoned, intensifying the eerie sensation. We notice the occasional tiny critters scurrying away from the invasive beams of our flashlights, their eyes reflecting in the light before they disappear into the crevices of the walls. "I wonder what these tunnels were used for," I say, breaking the silence that has fallen over us. My voice echoes through the tunnel, bouncing back to us and making the hair at the back of my neck stand up. "Could have been a secret military operation, maybe?" Alex suggests, always quick to jump on the most fantastical explanation. Kim laughs, or a smuggling route. Ryan shakes his head. "It could just be an old sewer system or something." Then, about 100 yards in, we come across a split in the path. One tunnel veers to the left and another to the right. Alex suggests we should go left, it looks less narrow. Kim counters, but the right one seems to slope upwards. Maybe it leads to an exit. Ryan pulls out a coin. "Let's flip a coin. Heads we go left, tails we go right." I can't help but laugh at this absurdity, but in the end we agree. Ryan flips the coin. It lands on heads, and left it is. As we trudge along the left tunnel, it gradually narrows and starts to slope downward. We continue in single file now, our shoulders brushing against the rough stone walls. Around another bend, the tunnel expands into a large chamber. Looking around, I can barely see the boundaries of this underground room. The chamber, as far as we can estimate, stretches out to about 50 feet in width. It's hard to gauge its exact size, but comparing it to the dimensions of our school gym, it seems pretty close. What surprises us even more is the height of the chamber. As we angle our flashlights upwards, their beams fail to reach the ceiling. I estimate it to be at least 40 feet, maybe more, based on the way our lights seem to lose their battle against the darkness above. The walls of the chamber are similar to the tunnels, constructed from the same cold, rough stone with the occasional intrusion of tree roots and patches of moss. The air here is cooler. "This place is huge," I say, my voice echoing around us, making the space feel even larger. Kim responds, "I never would have guessed something like this was under our neighborhood." As our lights sweep across the chamber, they reveal multiple tunnels branching off from this central area, some narrower than others, some sloping upward, others downward. "How many tunnels do you think there are?" Ryan asks, squinting into the dark. I count quickly. At least 7, I think, Alex adds. And they all seem to lead in different directions. This place is like a maze. We quickly realize that venturing randomly into one of the multiple tunnels branching off the chamber could potentially get us lost. Ryan suggests we should map out our route, mark the walls or something so we know how to get back. Kim agrees. Good idea, we can use chalk. I have some in my bag. With Kim's colorful chalk, we start by drawing an arrow on the floor at the entrance of the chamber, pointing back the way we came. We also decide to always keep to the right whenever we come across a junction to avoid getting lost. The tunnel is narrower, requiring us to walk single file. As we walk deeper, the tunnel begins to slope downward. We continue in silence, the only sound being our synchronized footsteps and the occasional drip of water in the distance. Our flashlights reveal more of the same cold stone, but every now and then, something new catches our eye. At one point, we stumble across a wall with strange markings. It's hard to discern what they might be in the dim light. Kim leans in closer, tracing her fingers over the rough etchings. They look old. Really old, she murmurs. Further along, we notice the tunnel starting to widen again, and the ceiling stretches higher. The air here feels a bit fresher, a bit less stale. The stone under our feet changes, becoming smoother and more worn. Suddenly, my flashlight catches something in the corner of the tunnel. Hey guys, look at this, I say, pointing my beam at a small mound of odd, papery material. We gather around to inspect the pile. As we get closer, it becomes apparent that these are shed skins. They are oddly translucent, with a parchment-like texture. The skins are crumpled and discarded, appearing as if whatever creature shed them had simply crawled out and left them behind. The color of them varies from a ghostly white to a dull gray. Oh my God, Kim breathes out, her voice a whisper in the echoing chamber. Are these shed skins? I think so, Alex confirms, crouching down to take a closer look. But not like any snake or insect I've ever seen. I look from one friend to another, seeing my own growing unease reflected in their faces. It's one thing to theorize about the presence of creatures, but it's another thing entirely to see the physical evidence. Ryan takes a few steps back, shining his light further down the tunnel. This means there's something alive down here, he says, stating the obvious but somehow making it more real. Yeah, I respond. And judging by the size of these skins, it's nothing small. We all share a moment of silence, the gravity of our discovery sinking in. Further into the tunnel, we discover a set of footprints, unlike any we've seen before. They're imprinted in a soft patch of earth, each print bearing 6 distinct fingers, with the hint of a claw at the ends. I've never seen prints like these, Ryan says, crouching down to inspect them closely. His words amplify the uneasiness slowly creeping upon us. The most disturbing find is a pile of discarded food remains. The remnants include a variety of half-eaten bugs and a few small, gnawed-on mammal bones. This is kind of terrifying, Kim murmurs, eyeing the pile with a mix of fascination and revulsion. Suddenly, Alex freezes in his tracks, his hand outstretched to halt us. Look, he whispers, his voice trembling as he points ahead. My heart thuds against my ribcage as I follow his line of sight. There, further down the tunnel, lit by the narrow beam of our flashlights, is a creature. It's monstrous, a grotesque form of life sculpted by years of darkness. It's larger than any of us, crouched low, and its skin is an eerie, sickly gray. The discarded skins we'd found earlier suddenly make sense. The creature moves on all fours, each foot ending in a set of 6 clawed digits. Its back arches slightly with skin stretched over prominent bones. Its eyes are what catch my attention the most, large, round, and reflective. They catch the light from our flashlights and throw it back in a ghostly glow. For a moment, we are frozen in our tracks, captivated by the terrifying sight before us. Then, in the chilling silence that has fallen over us, the creature stirs. Its massive head swivels towards us. The sight of its reflective eyes locking onto us sends a surge of adrenaline through my veins. It lets out a low sound that bounces off the walls of the tunnel, filling the space around us. The sound is unlike anything I've ever heard, an eerie combination of growls and hisses that raise the hairs on the back of my neck. It's seen us. Back away slowly. Alex whispers, his voice trembling but determined. We begin to retreat carefully, keeping our eyes locked on the creature. The flashlight beams shake in our trembling hands, casting an eerie light on the tableau. The creature watches us. Its massive form is still crouched in the tunnel. It makes no move to follow. It just watches, and the sound of its raspy breath echoes in the silence of the tunnel. The creature remains unmoving, its gaze never straying from ours. "Stay together," I whisper, my voice trembling. There's an unsettling intelligence in its gaze that makes me shudder. We walk back down the tunnel, trying to remember the way we came. Our adventurous spirit has been replaced with a single-minded focus on escaping the tunnel system. Suddenly, the tunnel echoes with the sound of the creature's low growl, making us jump. We turn back to look, and we see the creature start to follow us. We quicken our pace, and our footsteps reverberate loudly in the stone tunnel. Suddenly, we all stop in our tracks. Another sound interrupts our escape. It's faint at first, but grows steadily louder. The unmistakable sound of movement coming from a different direction in the tunnels. "Wait, do you guys hear that?" Kim whispers, her voice shaking. We all listen, and in the silence, the sound is unmistakable. The sound of claws against stone, coming from an intersecting tunnel ahead. A cold shiver runs down my spine. There's more than one of these creatures in the darkness. Their location is impossible to determine in the web of tunnels that surround us. The realization makes our situation even more dire. We're trapped in a dark maze with unknown creatures, and the exit feels more and more unreachable. "We need to keep moving," Ryan says. His voice is firm, trying to instill some sense of courage. "Stick together and follow the path we came from." We stick together and try to retrace our steps back to the entrance. Suddenly, the narrow confines of the tunnel give way to a larger space, and the beam of our flashlights dance across a new chamber we hadn't encountered before. The chamber we've stumbled upon is immense, easily the largest space we've encountered in the tunnel system so far. I estimate the chamber to be about the size of a football field. Our flashlights sweep across the area, revealing rough stone walls that stretch upwards until they disappear into the darkness. Unlike the previous chambers and tunnels we've explored, this one feels different. The air here is colder and damper. The walls of the chamber themselves are intriguing. They are not smooth but jagged and raw, as if forcefully carved out from the earth. The chamber is primarily empty, adding to its eeriness. But as we sweep our flashlights around, we notice something that makes us pause. There's a strange marking on one of the walls, an array of scratches that seem out of place. Upon closer inspection, the scratches seem deliberate, almost like some kind of language or code. We didn't come this way before. His voice echoing in the spacious cavern. A wave of cold realization washes over us. In our panicked escape, we've taken a wrong turn. I swallow hard, feeling a knot of fear in my stomach. The terrifying reality of our situation hits us harder than ever. Not only are we deep inside a maze with these creatures, but we're now also lost. Every direction seems the same. The dark, gaping entrances of various tunnels promise nothing but more confusion. We need to think this through, Kim says, her voice wavering. We can't lose our heads. We decide to turn back, to retrace our steps to the tunnel from which we emerged into the chamber. We know our chances are better if we stick to what's somewhat familiar, even if it's a path that's brought us here, lost and scared. A sound freezes us in our tracks. It's a low growl, resonating from the darkness of the tunnel we were about to venture back into. The echo carries the growl throughout the chamber, bouncing off the walls and ringing in our ears. Our flashlights illuminate the tunnel entrance just in time to catch a glimpse of the luminescent eyes of the creature. It's still following us, stalking us through the shadows of the tunnel system. We can't go back the way we came. We have to find another way out. We turn back to the chamber, and our flashlight beams dance across the walls, desperately seeking another exit. We scan the chamber, and the vast space now feels even larger, even more intimidating. There are a few tunnels leading out from it. We have no choice but to choose one and hope it can lead us back to where we came from. We can't just guess our way out of here, he says, his voice echoing around the chamber. We need to think this through. Any ideas? Ryan steps forward, his flashlight beam focused on the 3 visible tunnel entrances. We need a way that's as far from that thing as possible. But also, remember when we entered the tunnel system? The path sloped downwards. If we want to get out, we should find a tunnel that heads upwards, right? Ryan's reasoning makes sense. We need to head up, back towards the surface. Kim, who's been silent, now speaks. That tunnel, the one on the far left, it seems to have a slight incline, she says, pointing with her flashlight. We all turn our attention to the tunnel Kim has indicated. It does seem to rise, albeit slightly. With a collective nod, we agree. Let's do it, I say, trying to keep my voice steady. Stay close, stay quiet, and keep your flashlights ahead. As we step into the chosen tunnel, the sound of our footsteps bounces off the narrow stone walls. The beam from our flashlights is the only source of light, providing a meager path ahead. The tunnel continues to rise gently. Our pace quickens as we navigate the upwards incline. We reach a point where the tunnel forks into 2 pathways, one continuing upwards and the other branching off to the right. We pause to examine the 2 tunnels. So, what do we do? Alex asks. Ryan kneels, examining the ground at the mouth of each tunnel. I don't see any footprints or other signs to suggest which way the creatures might prefer, he whispers. Kim points out, but remember our strategy? We chose to follow the upward path. Alex nods. Kim's right. If we change our strategy now, we might end up going deeper, not higher. We need to stick to the plan. I feel a knot of fear in my stomach, but they're right. We can't let fear drive us off course. The upward path seems our best bet. Okay, then we'll continue upwards, I tell them. And with that, we move towards the tunnel that continues to ascend. The air feels colder here, carrying a damp smell that seems to intensify as we progress. We keep our flashlights trained ahead, revealing nothing more than the unending stone walls. As we move, I notice the walls of the tunnel start to change. The stone seems more worn, and there are fewer signs of the creatures we've been trying to avoid. I can't tell if it's a good sign or just another unknown we're walking into. Finally, we reach another split in the tunnel. One path continues upwards while the other veers off to the left. Again, we find ourselves at a crossroads. We stick to our plan, choosing the path that continues to ascend, guided by the simple logic of up means out. As we traverse the selected path, the air begins to change. There's a freshness to it, a subtle shift that raises my hopes. Are we getting closer to the surface? Just when the fatigue begins to set in, we come upon a familiar sight. It's the first chamber we found when we initially entered the tunnels. As the realization dawns, we exchange silent glances. But as our flashlights move around the room, they catch something else. A pair of reflective eyes staring back at us from the darkness. I feel my heart stop, and a chill runs down my spine. Guys, do you see that? I whisper, my voice trembling. All our beams converge on the spot, confirming what I've seen. It's one of the creatures, huddled in the shadows of the chamber, caught off guard by our sudden arrival. Its eyes, reflecting our flashlight beams, give away its position. Kim stifles a scream, her hand tightly gripping my arm. Ryan steps back, bumping into Alex, who swears under his breath. We're all frozen and we hold our breaths. The creature doesn't move, but its eyes follow our lights, and a low growl reverberates through the chamber. I notice the arrow we drew on the ground earlier, but it's pointing toward the creature. We need to find a way past this creature and get out of these tunnels, and we need to do it fast. We stand frozen for a moment, and our minds race to figure out the best course of action. Ryan breaks the silence. We need a diversion, something to distract it long enough for us to slip past, he whispers. Kim nods, rummaging through her backpack. She pulls out a can of soda. We could use this, throw it to the far end of the chamber. The sound might distract it, she suggests, her hand trembling slightly as she holds the can out. Alex looks skeptical. Are you sure it's going to work? But it's more of a rhetorical question. Our options are limited. This seems as good a plan as any. I give a nod of agreement and take the can from Kim. With a deep breath, I lob the can, aiming for the furthest end of the chamber. It arcs through the air before it crashes onto the stone floor. The creature's head snaps towards the sound, its eyes leaving our group for the first time. This is our chance. We start moving, doing our best to tread lightly, and we dim our flashlights to avoid drawing attention. As we edge closer to the path leading away from the chamber, the creature remains distracted, its attention still fixated on the far end. We continue to move, praying that our plan holds up just a little longer. As we edge closer to the exit, the creature seems to remain distracted, its entire focus. And the rattling can at the other end of the chamber. We move as silently as we can, holding our breath, every step taken with meticulous care. Suddenly, we're only a few feet away from the path leading out of the chamber. But just as we're about to breathe a sigh of relief, the creature turns its head, its glowing eyes fixing on us once again. For a moment, everything freezes. Us, the creature, and the echoing sound of the can rolling across the chamber floor. Then, with a growl, it starts to move toward us. But we're so close to our escape, we can't turn back now. With a collective surge of adrenaline, we break into a run, bolting towards the tunnel leading out of the chamber. Our flashlights bounce erratically as we sprint, casting wild shadows on the tunnel walls. Behind us, the creature gives chase and its growls grow louder. But the terror of the moment fuels our speed. We're desperate to get back to the surface, to safety. We finally see a break in the endless stone and darkness, a small patch of light. Hope surges within us. It's the exit. We're almost there. Just as we nearly make it, a final roar echoes from the chamber, but we don't look back. We can't afford to. The exit is a small, circular opening about 3 feet above our heads. Alex, the tallest among us, takes a knee, cupping his hands to give Ryan a boost. Ryan steps into Alex's hands, and with a strong push from Alex, manages to hoist himself up and scramble out of the opening. Kim goes next, using the step up from Alex to reach the exit. I hear her gasp as she emerges into the daylight, followed by the sounds of Ryan helping her to move clear of the opening. Finally, it's just Alex and me. Without a word, Alex shifts his position, giving me a nod. I step into his hands, and my heart pounds as he pushes upwards. Feeling a pair of hands grabbing mine, I'm pulled up and out, in the sunlight momentarily. Now it's just Alex in the tunnel. We don't waste any time. I lay down flat on the grass, extending my hand as far into the tunnel as I can. Alex takes a few steps back, then launches himself towards the exit. His fingers latch onto mine and I grip them tightly, my other hand joining to pull. Behind me, I feel the others adding their strength, and with our collective effort, we pull Alex up and out of the tunnel. We collapse in a heap on the panting heavily, and the waning sunlight warms our faces. We've made it. We're safe and back in our neighborhood. It's a moment of mixed emotions, relief, exhaustion, and a sense of accomplishment. Still panting from the run, we gradually pick ourselves up from the ground, exchanging glances that speak volumes. Our clothes are dirt-streaked, our faces pale from the terror we've just escaped. There's a spark of shared triumph in our eyes. We all sit there for a while, not saying a word. Who would have thought that beneath these manicured lawns and peaceful houses lurked a network of tunnels inhabited by creatures of the dark? We get up slowly and cast one last look at the hidden entrance before covering it with some nearby branches and leaves. It's a crude camouflage, but it will work for now. Perhaps one day we'll come back, better prepared, to explore the mysteries beneath our feet. But for now, we're content to leave it behind. We walk back home together, and the sounds of our laughter and chatter fill the air, a contrast to the silence of the tunnels. In the days that follow, our lives return to normal. School, homework, and hangouts at the local park. But every so often we'd exchange knowing glances about what we discovered and what we experienced. We've been planning this camping trip for months, ever since the first signs of spring started to thaw the winter's icy grip. All 6 of us, Mackenzie, Anthony, Ryan, Allison, Sophie, and me, finally agreed on a weekend in late October to venture into the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. It's a compromise between those of us who crave the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest and those who prefer the more familiar terrain closer to our home base in Atlanta. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park seems like the perfect middle ground. Today, after weeks of anticipation, we pack our cars with camping gear, food, and all the outdoor essentials. We set out in the early morning, hoping to reach the campsite before afternoon. The drive itself is a picturesque journey, with lush trees showcasing the splendor of fall, reds, oranges, and yellows splashed against the canvas of the forest. The air gets crisper as we ascend into the mountains. Each turn offering an even more breathtaking view than the last. Finally, we arrive at the Elkmont Campground, one of the most popular sites in the park. It's relatively empty, perhaps because most people are deterred by the late-season weather. We're just happy it means fewer neighbors and more solitude. We select a site that offers a balance of open space and tree cover, somewhere we can easily pitch our tents, yet still feel enveloped by the wilderness. Mackenzie and Allison immediately get to work on the tents, expertly threading poles through fabric loops. Anthony and Ryan are on firewood duty, venturing into the woods with axes in hand. Sophie has her camera out and is capturing every moment, from the menial tasks of setting up camp to the natural beauty surrounding us. By the time we finish setting up, the sun has reached its peak in the sky. We take a moment to admire our handiwork. 3 tents neatly aligned, a fire pit ready for tonight's bonfire, and a makeshift kitchen area where we'll prepare our meals. We have the rest of the day to explore, and we're eager to take advantage of it. But first, lunch. We prepare sandwiches and a salad, taking time to enjoy our first meal in the great outdoors. Mackenzie brings out her infamous chocolate chip cookies for dessert. As we eat, we discuss plans for the afternoon. A consensus is reached to go for a hike, targeting a trail known for its waterfall views. "Everyone have their hiking boots?" Anthony asks as we prepare to set out. "Yep, good to go," Ryan replies, double knotting his laces for good measure. The hike proves to be both exhilarating and exhausting, filling our lungs with fresh mountain air and our souls with a sense of peace that's hard to find in the city. We reach the waterfall, and it's just as breathtaking as promised. A cascade of water tumbling over rocks framed by the autumn foliage. Sophie, of course, takes this opportunity to snap a few photos, capturing the beauty for posterity. We make it back to camp just as the sun begins its descent, casting a golden glow over our site. Dinner is a feast of grilled burgers and roasted veggies, followed by the obligatory s'mores. "Hey guys, do you think we brought enough food?" Mackenzie asks as she pulls a large bag of marshmallows from one of the several plastic containers laid out on the wooden picnic table. The table is covered with an array of food items: bags of chips, sandwich fixings, canned beans, and a cooler full of drinks. "With the amount you eat, never," Anthony replies. His joke is punctuated by the sound of a stick landing on an already sizable pile of firewood. He's been busy collecting branches and logs from the surrounding area, anticipating a night of storytelling and laughter around the campfire. Our laughter rings out, filling the open space of our campsite, nestled among towering pine trees. Above us, the sky is a brilliant shade of blue. The sun is at its zenith, casting a warm, inviting glow on our setup. We have tents assembled in a semicircle around the fire pit, and backpacks are neatly placed next to each tent. Despite the idyllic setting, we are aware of the looming weather change. We've been occupied with setting up camp and preparing lunch, a smorgasbord of deli meats, cheeses, and bread. But as we move toward dinner time, we become aware of the shifting atmosphere. The wind rustles the treetops more aggressively, and the sky transforms. Once bright and clear, it's now clouding over, becoming a canvas of darkening grays. Noticing the change, Anthony pulls out his phone from the pocket of his cargo shorts. He taps the screen a few times and studies the weather app, and his face turns serious. "Guys, this isn't looking good," Anthony announces, holding his phone out for us to see. The screen displays a weather map, and even with our limited meteorological knowledge, we can tell the approaching storm system is large and intense. "The storm is moving faster than expected," he continues. "It's not just a bit of snow, it's a lot. and it's headed directly for us. His words sink in, cutting through the earlier excitement. We glance at each other, concern replacing the smiles on our faces. It's no longer a question of whether we have enough marshmallows or chips. We are faced with the more pressing concern of how to stay safe and warm in what is rapidly turning into a challenging situation. Snow? Are you kidding? Allison's eyes widen as she stares at Anthony's phone screen, displaying the weather alert. Her concern is visible, even in the dimming light. She tugs at the zipper of her fleece jacket, as if the action might somehow fend off the cold that's threatening to envelop us. No time for jokes, Ryan interjects, looking equally worried. He sets down the campfire poker he was using to stoke the fire. The flames, once cheerful and inviting, now seem insufficient against the impending storm. What's our plan? We can't stay in the tents. It's going to be impossible, I say, gripped by a sense of urgency. The fabric of our tents is sturdy, but not designed to withstand heavy snowfall and strong winds. We need to find shelter, and quickly. All right, grab the essentials, Sophie commands. Her camera, which was out and ready to capture our camping moments, is swiftly packed into its bag. The bag's zipper makes a quick zipping sound as she secures it. She slings it over her shoulder, already thinking ahead to what we'll need to survive the night. We all spring into action, our earlier relaxation replaced by adrenaline-fueled focus. Mackenzie opens the largest of our storage containers and starts pulling out bottles of water. Each bottle is placed into backpacks that we've emptied in a rush, leaving behind non-essentials like extra clothes and games. Allison grabs canned food and a can opener, adding them to her pack. Anthony tosses in a first aid kit, its red color a stark contrast to the earthy tones of our camping gear. Ryan and I are on flashlight duty, checking to make sure they work before adding them to the growing pile of necessities. We pull on our thickest jackets, hats, and gloves, bracing ourselves for the cold. Our boots are laced tightly, ready for the trek that lies ahead. Backpacks are hoisted onto shoulders, their weight a reminder of the seriousness of our situation. With one last glance at our campsite, we set off towards a dense part of the forest. The trees there are older and thicker, promising some degree of shelter from the wind and snow. We move quickly, following a barely visible trail that Anthony had explored earlier in the day. Our flashlights cut through the growing darkness, creating pools of light on the forest floor. As if on cue, the first snowflakes start to fall. At first, they're sparse, floating down lazily from the sky. But within minutes, they multiply, and the air is filled with a flurry of white. What started as a delicate snowfall rapidly transforms into a torrential downpour of snow. We quicken our pace, aware that every minute counts. The snow is relentless, and the wind starts to howl, a clear sign that the storm is not just arriving, but is already here, full force. We tighten our hoods and pull our backpack straps closer, pressing on in search of the shelter that is now essential for our survival. Boots heavy and faces stung by the icy wind, we spot it, a cave. Hidden behind a dense thicket of prickly bushes and under a rocky overhang, the cave opens up like a dark mouth in the mountainside. It appears to be empty and, more importantly, large enough to accommodate all of us. Relief washes over us as we move inside, leaving the biting cold and howling wind behind. Dropping his backpack and pulling out some of the firewood he had the foresight to bring along, he sets up the logs in the center of the cave, away from the walls, and starts stacking smaller twigs and leaves as kindling. "Good, I'm freezing," Mackenzie admits, her voice shaking a bit. She vigorously rubs her gloved hands up and down her arms in an attempt to generate some heat. Her face is red, not just from the cold, but also from the relief that comes with finding refuge. Allison and Ryan, who have been quiet during our trek, now spring into action. They unzip their backpacks and begin to unload our food supplies onto a flat rock that serves as a makeshift table. Canned beans, bags of trail mix, and even a loaf of bread are carefully arranged. Sophie, who until now had been contemplating whether to capture this dramatic turn of events with her camera, decides against it. She sets her camera bag in a corner of the cave, out of the way. This moment, she seems to think, is not one for posterity, but for immediate practical concerns. Anthony strikes a match and holds it to the kindling. After a tense moment where it seems the fire might not catch, the twigs start to crackle, then burst into flames. Anthony adds more logs, and soon we have a fire that roars with both heat and light, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. The atmosphere in the cave starts to change almost instantly. The fire's warmth pushes back the cave's damp chill, filling the air with a smoky but comforting scent. It's a small triumph, but under the circumstances, it feels monumental. Eager to shed the cold that has seeped into our bones, we huddle as close to the fire as safety allows. We stretch out our hands and feet towards the flame, wiggling our fingers and toes to encourage circulation. Our wet clothes start to steam as they dry, and for the first time in what feels like hours, our shivering starts to subside. Our faces, which had been pinched in concentration and concern, begin to relax. The dire situation is far from resolved, but for now, in this moment, we have fire, we have food, and we are sheltered. At least we're not in the storm, right? Mackenzie tries to inject some optimism into the tense atmosphere. She rummages through her backpack and pulls out a box of granola bars. Tearing the box open, she offers one to each of us, her eyes meeting ours as if to say, "We'll get through this." "Yeah, it could be worse," Ryan chimes in, grabbing a granola bar and taking an absent-minded bite. But even as he says it, I notice his gaze drift past us, focusing deeper into the shadowy depths of the cave. His eyes narrow and his expression turns puzzled, as if he's trying to make sense of something he can't quite place. "You okay?" I inquire, catching his attention. His eyes snap back to me, and for a moment he seems to weigh whether to say what's on his mind. "Yeah, just thought I heard something," he finally admits. He shakes his head briskly, as if trying to physically dispel whatever thought or sound had momentarily captured his attention. Our collective energy is low, but the fire's steady warmth starts to act like a balm, alleviating the sharp edges of our concerns, at least temporarily. With the immediate crisis of shelter and warmth resolved, we start to unwind. Conversations become less about immediate needs and more about life outside this cave. We share stories of past adventures, favorite meals, and even discuss the latest season of a popular TV show. Despite the laughter and chatter, there's an undercurrent of discomfort that we all seem to feel but choose not to acknowledge. A nagging feeling that we're not the only occupants of this cave clings to each of us. Every so often, one of us will pause, eyes darting to a dark corner, or ears straining to pick up a sound that doesn't belong. But each time we dismiss it, attributing the uneasy feeling to the stress of the situation and the relentless howling of the wind outside the cave's entrance. After all, our senses are heightened, and the mind has a way of playing tricks when under duress. Still, the unspoken consensus is clear. It's easier to attribute our disquiet to familiar, understandable factors like stress or the storm outside. Acknowledging the possibility that we might not be alone in this cave would mean confronting an entirely different kind of danger, one that none of us are ready to face. The fire flickers, casting a warm glow on everyone's faces, but its light doesn't reach the far corners of the cave, which remain engulfed in darkness. We're huddled close to the flames, bundled up in whatever clothing we brought along. The mood is somber. We've all stopped talking, each lost in thought about the situation we're in. Allison's sudden question pulls us back to the moment. She's visibly tense, her posture rigid as she leans slightly forward, trying to pick up the sound that caught her attention. "What are you talking about?" Mackenzie glances away from her phone's screen, which displays a low battery warning. She holds it in her hand, debating whether to turn it off to preserve the little power that's left. Allison insists. There's a weird noise, like someone whispering. For a moment, we all hold our breaths, focusing solely on the sounds around us. The fire continues to crackle and pop, its noise mixing with the sound of the wind that's still strong outside the cave. We all go quiet, listening intently. At first, I hear nothing but the crackle of the fire and the distant howl of the wind outside, and then, faintly, a whispering sound drifts from deeper within the cave. It's soft and unintelligible, but unmistakably there. "It's probably just the wind," Ryan suggests, but he doesn't sound convinced. "Yeah, wind that knows how to whisper," Anthony quips nervously. We try to shake it off and go back to our conversations, but the atmosphere has changed. We're all a little more alert, ears tuned to any sound that isn't one of us or the fire. Then Ryan stands up abruptly. "Where's my water bottle?" We search the immediate area. His water bottle, which he distinctly remembers placing next to his backpack, is gone. Ryan is adamant as he points to the area next to his bag. "I swear I put it right there." His insistence carries a tone of growing worry. His eyes meet each of ours in turn, as if silently pleading for someone to produce a logical explanation. Sophie, always the pragmatist, offers one. "Maybe you misplaced it." Yet even she can't keep a slight tremor out of her voice. She looks uneasy, as though she's aware her explanation doesn't fully sit right with the rest of what's going on. Before we can delve into a deeper discussion about the missing water bottle, Anthony interrupts us. "Guys, look at this." He's moved away from our makeshift campsite and is now standing next to one of the cave's walls. In his hand, the flashlight casts a focused beam on the rock face, revealing etched symbols. We cluster around Anthony, eyes widening as the light illuminates a series of inscriptions. They aren't random scratches or marks. They form a deliberate pattern. They appear to represent some form of language or script, though it's unlike anything I've ever encountered. "Is that writing?" Mackenzie says, her voice a mix of disbelief and a mounting sense of dread. She looks from the wall to each of us, as if hoping someone will tell her she's imagining things. Anthony moves his flashlight up and down, illuminating more of the strange etchings. "I don't know, but it doesn't look natural, that's for sure," he says. There's a noticeable quiver in his voice, a raw edge that I've rarely heard from him. With that, the gravity of our situation becomes impossible to ignore. "We are not alone in this cave. We need to leave," Allison declares. Her voice trembles with evident panic, and she scans our faces for agreement. "And go where? Into the storm?" Ryan retorts, his voice tinged with a mix of incredulity and frustration. "Look, I'm not thrilled about staying here, but what are our options? Maybe it's better to face a storm than whatever made those symbols." I chime in. I'm torn, my own voice carrying a mix of reluctance and a pinch of dread. I look around, trying to gauge the room. We're all on edge, but no one is willing to make the final call on what we should do. But it's Sophie who finally breaks the deadlock. "Listen, we don't know what we're dealing with, but I do know that we're safer together," she says firmly. "The storm is still raging outside," she continues, gesturing vaguely toward the cave entrance where the sound of howling wind and pelting snow is still audible. "Our best bet is to stick together, keep the fire going, and wait it out. We can handle this." Her words have a grounding effect, cutting through the fog of fear and doubt that has settled over us. One by one, we nod in agreement, each of us coming to the realization that Sophie is right. Our strength is indeed in our unity. "We stick together, then," Anthony says, succinctly summing up the group's unspoken consensus. He throws another log onto the fire, the flames leaping up as if encouraged by our decision. We return to our circle around the fire, each of us sitting noticeably closer to one another than before. The atmosphere is tense, and our senses are heightened to a near excruciating level. Each sound that drifts from the unseen depths of the cave, the slightest creak or distant whisper, makes us jump. But we put on brave faces for our own sakes as well as for each other's. But deep down, each of us is wrestling with the same realization. We are sharing this cave with something we can't see but feel is ever present. Then out of nowhere, a sharp scream shatters the quiet. We all snap our heads toward Allison. She's gripping her arm tightly, her knuckles white. Blood is seeping through her fingers from a gash that seems to have appeared out of nowhere. His voice tinged with both concern and alarm. He moves quickly toward Allison, his face a mask of confusion and worry. "I have no idea. Something slashed me," Allison exclaims. Her voice quivers with panic and her eyes are wide with disbelief. Anthony is already on his feet, lunging for the first aid kit we had stashed near the backpacks. He rips it open and hurriedly pulls out gauze and antiseptic. Without wasting a second, he starts to clean Allison's wound, his hands working quickly but cautiously as he wraps a bandage tightly around her arm to stem the bleeding. Then Sophie gets up and walks over to our bags laying against the cave wall behind us. I'm doing a quick check of our supplies to see if there's anything that might help us, Sophie announces. She zips open her bag and starts rummaging through its contents. A flashlight, some rope, a utility knife, and then her fingers hit something at the bottom of her bag that makes her stop. Curious, she grabs it and pulls it out. It's an old journal, its cover worn and pages yellowed. "Guys, look at this," she says, holding up the journal, her eyebrows furrowed in puzzlement. "How did it get in my bag?" "Intriguing as it is creepy," I reply. "Might as well see what's inside. It could be relevant." Sophie opens the journal and starts flipping through its brittle pages. Her eyes scan the entries quickly before she begins to read aloud. June 14th, 2015. I can't sleep. The noises are getting louder, like whispers, but not quite. Things are missing from our camp. Jason is sure he put his flashlight next to his sleeping bag, but now it's gone. She turns a few pages and continues. June 16th, 2015. The symbols on the walls are like nothing I've ever seen. They aren't just random. They are part of some language, a script maybe. I feel eyes on me. We all do. Mark says it's just stress, but I don't think so. Her voice grows softer as she reaches the last entry. June 18th, 2015. It's our last night. Or it's supposed to be. We figured out a way to keep the entity at bay. Whatever is in this cave with us doesn't like... Sophie's voice stops abruptly, her eyes widening as she turns the page. It's torn, precisely at the point where it should reveal this vital piece of information. With a sense of disbelief, she flips through the remaining blank pages, but there's nothing more, her voice revealing a mix of disbelief and fear that seems to echo in the confined space of the cave. "Okay, listen up," Anthony commands, his eyes making contact with each of us in a deliberate manner. He stands to make his point, filling the small space with his presence. We can't just sit here and do nothing. We need to take action. But what can we do? Ryan's voice is tinged with a frustration that mirrors the helplessness we all feel. His eyes dart from face to face as if searching for answers that he knows aren't there. We stick to the plan. Sophie's voice cuts through the tension like a knife. Her eyes lock onto ours, one by one, as if willing us to agree. Stay together, keep the fire going, and wait. It's all we can do. We nod in agreement, as the alternative is too frightening to contemplate. Allison picks up a log and places it on the fire, the flames licking at the wood before enveloping it entirely. Then a low growl rises from the darkest recesses of the cave. It's a sound unlike any we've heard, chilling in its implications. We exchange glances, seeing our own fears reflected back at us in a tapestry of wide eyes and tight lips. Did everyone hear that? Or am I losing it? Anthony's voice is so soft it's almost drowned out by the crackling of the fire. His eyes are wide, his face pale. We heard it, I affirm, my voice betraying the shakiness I feel but can't hide. The weight of dread in the cave feels almost physical, pressing in on us from all sides. Each little noise, even the subtle settling of rocks, jolts us and keeps us alert. I hear the sound of a flashlight clattering to the cave floor. I look around the others and see Ryan, who was just here, has disappeared. It's as if he was swallowed by the darkness itself. "Ryan?" My voice bounces off the cave walls, creating a series of haunting echoes. What the hell is happening in this cave? "What's in here with us?" Anthony asks, as his hands clench into fists. Allison's eyes are open wide. Her face is pale but flushed from the adrenaline. "That's it. We can't wait any longer. We have to get out of this cave immediately." The urgency in Anthony and Allison's voices drives home the gravity of our situation. One of us is missing, and whatever is lurking in the cave is beyond our understanding. It's time for action, and every second counts. In the blanket of snow, we take quick action. We grab the essential items, canned food, the first aid kit complete with Allison's used bandages, flashlights with extra batteries, and other necessities. Bundled in our coats, hats, and scarves, we muster the courage to step into the storm. Snowflakes immediately cling to our clothing, and the wind seems to cut through every layer, but we push forward.
However, something feels off as we walk. The landscape around us seems to subtly move, almost as if rearranging itself. Confusion sets in, and before we can fully process what's happening, we find ourselves back at the entrance to the cave. It's as though the cave itself, or some invisible force, has pulled us back. "This can't be happening," Mackenzie mutters, staring at the cave as if expecting it to offer some answers. "We're either going in circles, or something is actively pulling us back here," Sophie observes. Her eyes narrow as they scan the length of the cave, her gaze pausing momentarily on the symbols etched into the walls. Frustrated yet determined, we re-enter the cave. Our eyes search every nook and cranny, every odd rock formation, and every shadow. We're desperate for clues, for something that might offer us a way to escape this nightmarish situation. My eyes landing on the old journal Sophie found earlier. Maybe we overlooked something. With that thought in mind, I snatch the journal and flip through its yellowing, brittle pages. As I begin to read, the others huddle around me. We dissect every sentence, scrutinizing every word for its possible significance. The atmosphere is tense. Our collective focus is sharp. We know this journal might be our only chance at understanding what we're up against and how to combat it. Suddenly, Sophie, who has been skimming the earlier entries, looks up with widened eyes. "Hold on a second," she exclaims. "It says here that the writer felt the entity was particularly drawn to light. Do you think we could use that information to our advantage?" Anthony jumps at the idea. "That's worth a try," he says. He immediately starts collecting dry twigs and leaves from the cave floor. If this entity is attracted to light, perhaps we can create some sort of diversion, something that will pull its focus away from the entrance long enough for us to make a break for it. The sense of urgency is palpable as we brainstorm how best to utilize this newfound information. After a quick discussion, we decide to use one of our flashlights as the source of light for the diversion. Allison volunteers her flashlight, clicking it on and off to make sure it's in good working order. "We can set the flashlight in the middle of the twigs and leaves," Mackenzie suggests. "That way the light diffuses and covers more area. If it's drawn to light, it won't be able to resist." Nodding in agreement, we place the flashlight carefully amid the dry twigs and leaves that Anthony gathered. We aim it in a direction opposite the cave's entrance, hoping to lure the entity as far away as possible. "All right, are we ready for this?" I ask, looking around at the faces of my friends. Each of us knows what's at stake, and each of us is ready to try anything for a shot at freedom. Let's turn on the flashlight and make a run for it. It's now or never. I take a deep breath and click the flashlight on. A beam of light cuts through the darkness of the cave, casting shadows on the walls. For a moment, everything is still. Then a low guttural growl reverberates from the depths of the cave, followed by the sound of shuffling footsteps. Our eyes widen in collective horror as we see it. A formless shadow darker than the surrounding darkness moving towards the light. For the first time, we're not just dealing with an invisible force. The entity is making itself known. The air turns colder, as if the cave itself is recoiling from the presence of this being. For a few seconds, we're frozen in place, our eyes locked onto the approaching entity. It's as if we're caught in some sort of trance, unable to look away, unable to move. The flashlight flickers, as if struggling to maintain its glow in the presence of such malevolence. Finally, Mackenzie breaks the silence with a sharp yell. "Run!" Her voice snaps us out of our paralysis. We turn on our heels, adrenaline fueling our movements, and bolt towards the cave's entrance. As we run, I glance back just in time to see the entity reach the flashlight. The light flickers out, plunging the cave into darkness once more. But there's no time to think about that now. We have to get out. We burst through the cave's entrance into the snowstorm outside. The snow is falling heavily, and the wind howls around us. But we don't care. For the first time, we feel like we've put some distance between ourselves and whatever that entity is. We keep running, trudging through the deep snow, driven by a primal need to distance ourselves from the cave and its dark inhabitant. The storm rages on, but it's a lesser evil compared to what we've left behind. Finally, we stop, gasping for breath, our eyes meeting in a mix of relief and lingering fear. For now, at least. We have escaped. As we continue to trudge through the snow-covered landscape, I can't help but think of Ryan. He's gone, and the reality sets in that we may never find out what happened to him. Suddenly, a glimmer catches my eye through the swirling snowflakes. At first, I think it's a trick of the light, or perhaps my imagination playing games with me. But then, as we get closer, the glimmer becomes more defined. It's a light, a beacon in the distance cutting through the darkness and the snow. My heart starts pounding in my chest as I realize what it is. The soft glow of a cabin window. An indescribable relief washes over me. The sight of that light is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. We quicken our pace, almost stumbling over ourselves in our eagerness to reach the cabin. Every step feels lighter now, as if we're being pulled towards safety by the promise of that distant light. Our exhaustion and fear are momentarily forgotten, replaced by a newfound hope. Finally, we arrive. The cabin is modest but inviting, a single light shining through the window onto the snowy landscape. We don't question our good fortune. We simply accept it, too weary and relieved to care about the hows and whys. We open the door and step inside, leaving the cold, the forest, and the lurking entity behind us. Inside, the cabin is warm and welcoming, filled with the rustic charm of wooden furniture and simple amenities. We shed our wet coats and boots, our bodies aching but grateful for the respite. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, we allow ourselves to relax, to breathe, and to feel a sense of security. Even as we settle into the cabin, the journal and the horrifying events of the night remain in the back of my mind. I realize that we may never fully understand what happened, why it happened, or what that entity was, and we'll probably never know what happened to Ryan. But for now, that's okay. We're safe, and that's what matters. As I look out the window at the snow-covered forest, it feels like we've emerged from a dark dream into a new reality, forever marked, but also forever grateful for this escape. The forest will always be there, its depths hiding secrets we may never unravel, but we've made it out. Download. Transcribe another file. Transcription times can vary depending on the file size, length of the content, and how busy our servers are.